Danse Nito Temtek, Kathy Richardson Nitsigassen. Hi, everyone. My name is Kathy Richardson, and I'm here in Jojage, the unceded lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka in Montreal, Canada, of course. And I have two wonderful people that I'm speaking with today. We're going to have a conversation about, I guess you could say, decolonizing psychology or decolonial psychology, culturally based ways of practicing and thinking about well-being. So we have Miriam and Sarah Memshut.
Hi there.
Do you want to start by introducing yourself? I don't know, which is the older sister? Does the older sister
It's
get to
me.
go first?
Sure,
Okay.
no problem. You
So
can go ahead.
tell
All
us
right.
who you are and where you are and that kind of what are you doing? Yeah.
All right. So my name is Sarah. I was born here on the unceded land of the Gahi-Gahagas. I am from Algerian origin, like my sister. Um, and I'm studying psychology at University of Montreal. And I'm really passionate about decolonization because to me it's super important to consider the history when you approach communities that have deep cultural and historical experience with mental health and everything. I think I'll
Mhm.
let my sister introduce herself too.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So my name is Miriam. I was also born here, and I'm also in psychology in UDM, University of Montreal. Like she said, it's really important to understand the backgrounds of the communities. And here in Montreal, we have so many different communities and cultures, and it's important to really take a moment and take it in consideration when we do psychology or any other science, in my opinion. So that's why I really like this topic.
Yeah. And just to give a bit of background, Algeria was colonized by France, and I'll put more information about that below on the Substack. And then there was what is called the Algerian War. I guess it was a resistance war against France of liberation. And, um, in my research, it said that it could be up to 1.5 million Algerians that died as a result of colonization, the war, and also including things like starvation and sort of the things that come along with war and colonialism. Do you want to add anything to that history and how your family navigated that to get you here?
Yes. So I would talk about it for like 300 hours if
Yeah.
I could. There's so much to say. I really like that you talked about this number, just the number of the 1.5 million. It's controversial. There's a lot of history tied to it because, from one side, the French side, they only acknowledge about 300,000, if I'm correct,
Less than that.
a bit less. And just that was brought so much anger, and it's still a sore spot in the Franco-Algerian relations because to this day they still don't recognize the scope of the horror that was done within that country. And when you speak with the elders, when you speak with the communities, when you talk about like why don't they recognize that, they will tell you that there was so much death that was invincible because there was so much people that gone missing,
Okay.
and they don't keep track of those, of course, but the families do. They know that this person never came back, this person left and never came back. They don't find the bodies because of like different ways that they did. So
Okay.
all of these people was taken into consideration when they did the count, and they don't.
Like Canada,
So
really, like
yes,
Canada has treated indigenous people here,
Exactly.
mostly
Exactly.
and murdered women, but also we know they're girls and boys,
yes,
two-spirit people. I mean, all all categories of indigenous
yeah.
peoples have suffered that kind of disappearance and erasure. Yeah, Miriam, you were going to add something to that.
No, yeah, I remember the first time I heard this number, but like the French number, because I always knew about the 1.5 million people that died during the war. But when I was in Sec 2, secondary, second year, we had this history class, and my teacher, she was Algerian too, but she was French, sorry. So she was born there, and she was like telling us about the war, and she told us, yeah, so it's about 250,000 people that died. And I was like, sorry, that's not the number that I was told. And she was like, no, that's the real number. That's how it is. And why are you arguing? Like, that's how it is. And I was so confused and angry because she is Algerian too, from Algerian origins at least. And that day, it made me so angry. Till this day, I still remember when I talked to her, and I was like, how is that possible to still deny to this day? It was really something for me. And like you said, it's something, it's not new. They do it all the time with every single horror that happened in history. They do not recognize, and I think it makes it even worse, like the grief and how we live things when you're still denying and like gaslighting us basically. So
Yeah, so we could say that along with colonialism comes misrepresentation and
Yeah.
cover-ups and erasure of truth. And the cliche used to be, oh, history is written by the victors. But
yes.
when
Mm,
it seems a bit trite when we think, ethically and thinking about people's lives. And right now we're in the context of a Gaza genocide. And so I think a lot of people are thinking about these things and wondering. Yeah, a loss of life is so painful for families, but then when other people don't believe that certain forms of violence aren't happening, it just makes it worse, that lack of justice, eh?
Yes, exactly.
and I
So
think
yeah.
it's really, oh, sorry, Ashley, I saw I was cutting you, but I wanted to add that it was also something that made me really angry when we knew about the history of the indigenous people, because there was so much similarity in this erasure, telling people that you needed to get over with, and it's like it's something along in the past when there is still people who lived it. Just about like the indigenous communities, there's so much history about, we think that for example, the boarding schools or the assimilation school, they were so long ago. They were still in living memories. Those horrors, they were still living, and we're telling them to get over with, to forgive. And to me, that was very interesting with my research about like decolonization, because there was this theme where how can we expect a people to forgive and grieve and do this healing process when we still don't recognize, when we deny, when we erase. And they're still alive, those people who went through it. And it was really interesting for me to just grapple with that idea of not letting those people heal properly. Uh,
Yeah, I think another thing that has to be acknowledged, at least Indigenous people often feel that colonialism here isn't over. It's
yeah.
still ongoing. And I would say it's extra thick in Quebec,
Mm,
particularly in the north of Quebec. But I've seen things here that shocked me, frankly,
yeah.
and also around the child welfare system. So, yeah,
Mm,
it's ongoing and it's painful. And there are, I guess we say, obfuscating, like discourses and things that pretend that it's all getting better, such as having a Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
yeah.
And in some ways, life is getting better at the same time that it's getting worse in
It's
ways for lots of people. So, um, yeah, there's lots of background and context.
mm,
So, in terms of your studies, I met you recently at the um, Resisting Decolonizations conference at UCAM in Montreal, and I was really moved by your presentation. I thought, wow, like the really sharp analysis. You two are really smart, and I'm just wondering if you want to share some of the key points that you presented there.
Miriam, do you want to go?
Sure. So, we started by talking about how it all happened. So we talked obviously about Darwin and we talked about the hierarchy of races and stuff. And then we went to talk about the um, consequences of the colonialism that still like they're still here. Like the consequences did not disappear because we gained independence, I don't know, like 60 years ago. So after that, we also mentioned a few ways that we can decolonize practices like psychology. So interesting points that we mentioned were, for example, like the main one I think is like the first thing that we should start with is recognize and stop ignoring or just like erasing the culture of the people that we want to that we want to help. So we have to take into consideration their point of view, their culture, their needs, and that is the most important thing. I think that we're still not doing. How can we treat somebody with my vision? I'm like that. That's how it works. That is what I call sick, and that's what I call not sick. So I apply my vision into other people that do not believe in what I'm doing. So obviously there are going to be a lot of I don't know what the word is like reticence towards psychologists and other
Resistance.
thank you. So yeah, I think that's the main thing that we talked about. The first thing that we should do.
So you're talking about the importance of cultural context and
Yeah.
respecting and learning about the cultural embeddedness of the person that you're speaking with and their values, what's important to them, and just not imposing ideas from Western culture or from other cultures that don't really have relevance for them. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think you talked about like the problems of individualizing
Yeah.
people from collectivist cultures. Do you want to say a few words about that, Sarah?
Yes, I can go ahead. I think that was like kind of the driving point of this article. It was the first thing that I knew in my core that there was this discordance, there's something that was not working when we treat or we try to help people from collectivist communities all over the world with this deeply individualist way of individualize the pain. And there was, and I felt that that was also being said in like the consciousness of those communities. Like they don't understand us, they bring everything to my individual, they don't consider this, they don't consider this, and everything. So that was something that I've noticed and I've wanted to talk about it. And then of course when I went into this research, I realized there was so much things to say. But especially this individualization was the most, I think, one of the most violent aspects of this epistemological colonialism, because there's this deep community way of thinking. um, I'm going to just talk about Algeria because I know this, the family, the communities, the everyone around us, it's we kind of like when there's a tragedy, it affects everyone. When something is going on, we live it as a community. And not only is there something, there's a pain that comes with leaving this community and being in the diaspora that's already need to be addressed, but to come and act like everything is within your capabilities, you can do everything yourself with it, it's kind of like toxic positivity, I would say, that we try to make it as you can do everything you want and you don't need to depend on anyone, you don't need your family, like you can just rebel and everything. That
Mhm.
feels deeply illogical and irrational when you speak with someone coming from those communities. Like, no, I cannot just ignore what my, for example, my mom says I should do. Like I can't just put that aside and prioritize myself and be selfish in that way. So that was my main takeaway. And when I did the research, it's like really deeply when with some psychological models like grief and attachment, the individualism is deeply rooted in the way that we conceptualized a lot of
Yeah.
concepts and definitions
Mhm.
that makes our intervention ineffective or not being accepted. It actually doesn't make us come to the wrong conclusions about what we see, especially in the scope of mental health and mental health behaviors. So yeah.
Yeah. So they have a saying, a First Nations saying that goes sort of like the suffering of one is the suffering of all. The honor of one is the honor
Yeah.
of all. And so it's really hard to like you're saying, imagine taking one person out of a family, giving them some therapy, and then expecting them just to be well, just having like processed things when other people in their family are suffering, right? Or like you mentioned, grief is handled in a really uh, collective collectivist community based way. We all need each other, and in the indigenous communities everyone has roles around this time that help in the grieving process, but also to support the family during difficult times. And so like you mentioned diaspora, you take people out of that, and even just that absence of familial and community support can
Yeah.
look like a mental health issue, but people are
Yes,
suffering because it's like somebody cut off their arm, right?
exactly. No, that was exactly something super interesting within this research that of course, I did not really get into, but I would love to. Is like you said, it's like you cut off your arm. Everything you used to support yourself, all your coping mechanism that revolved around this community way of thinking, just removed, and you're expected to just fly again. It's something so deeply hard for those people. What do I do? And that seems pathological. Like, why can't you just function? What's going on? What do you mean you can't regulate yourself anymore? You can't go through everything by individualist viewpoints. But those people lost their arm, they lost their legs, they can't stand normally because the support mechanism are gone, and they can't just rebuild that with no support as long, and no, like, there's so much layers to it, and the economic viewpoint that do like affect the way of viewing things. And yeah.
I'm just wondering, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm just
No.
wondering if you could think of an example or a story that would help the listeners
Mhm.
like really understand what you mean.
So there's so much. For example, I think something that is really interesting to view right now within my community, the Maghrebian community, there's a lot of issues around family and violence. And I think the violence is the main point where the people are not like, there's different understanding of what violent is and what violence is accepted. And there's kind of this discordance where society tells them you should not do that. That's not an acceptable way of doing things. And they're still grappling with this way of like viewing violence, especially when it was so normalized because colonialism, because everything. And so there's a lot of need for help in a familial context, familial therapy, familial support. Uh, because once again, like, the families used to be what, like 50 people helping to raise one child, and now they're alone with that child, and they don't know what to do with it. So I work at a transcultural clinic
Mhm.
that views that helps caseworkers and everything navigate through this cultural um, difficulties and the differences. And there's like, I would say 80% of the cases are familial violence type of issues, and they come and they feel they don't know what to do. They'd be like, that's what I've known. That's what I've known all my life.
Mhm.
And I have no one to support me. I have no time. I need to work every all day. And what do I do? I come home and he doesn't want to listen to me, and I don't know what to talk. I don't know how to tell him. There's this actually language barrier between generations that is happening. And they'd be like, I don't know how to communicate what I want. And that comes with violence, unfortunately, because they're overwhelmed. Uh, and since they're overwhelmed, that they don't have the correct coping mechanism because their arms was cut off, it manifests in this kind of unfortunate way.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue is that because we as a community or like as a society we don't understand these layers that comes into this violent behavior, we act in a worse way. We take
Yeah.
over the children and be like, you don't, okay, you can't handle this, you can't be a parent, you should lose your rights as a parent, and we're going to take them away. And what I realized that as like the community, the Arab community is remembering how the society is viewing them, and they're way and way less going for help, and
Right.
that makes the behavior worse and worse and worse.
Yes.
And this kind of like us versus them, and you can't tell them, and yes, you're not the happiest, but you can't ask for help, because if you ask for help, they're
They'll
going to take over
take
your
you away.
children, then
Yeah.
steal them from you, and you're never going
Mhm.
to see them again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's dividing between the access to some help, to some resources, has become large and large and large. And those parents that are more overwhelmed, they're more overwhelmed because they have some difficulties and they cannot ask for help because they're terrified of this idea of they're going to take over the children because they don't understand how we think. It's like, so there's so much aspects, and from time to time, it's even overwhelming to consider as someone from this community. There's like, you feel kind of this, you don't know what to say, you don't know what to say, there's so much layers, there's so much history behind it. And
Yeah.
it's, yeah.
But it sounds to me like you're saying something like we could help families, maybe particularly men, to unlearn violence, to find new ways to be in familial relations here in this context here. And to do that, we would need to respect some culture and treat people with dignity and respect and find out what they need, while at the same time gently moving the family situation towards more safety and
Yes.
adapting to, I guess, more of what's expected here in terms of nonviolence or mutual respect. How am I doing? Am I kind of summarizing?
No,
Yes.
that's
Be a good
That's
path?
exactly
exactly
it. Yeah. But
exactly what I wanted to say.
I
Yeah, man.
think that we cannot do that until we unlearn this idea of, like you said, Sarah, it's us versus them. Because even as a child, it's not just the parents that don't want the child to talk and complain, because yes, the parents are afraid, but they also teach the children to be afraid of the institution. So as a child, even if you're being abused or like you're not okay, you have other mental health problem, even if it's not related to violence or to like abuse from your parents, even if it's something else, but you know, or you feel, you think that if you go complain as a child who's Arab from those origins, they're going to take you away either way, because they're going to be like, if you're that depressed or you're not okay and you're living with your parents, it's their responsibility to take care of you and your mental health. And the fact that you're not doing okay, it's because they're not doing their role as a parent, so we're going to take you away. Obviously that's not how it works, but that's what we've been told and what we've been taught. And so there's this, like, even as individuals, we kind of repress or like ignore certain mental health problems because we're afraid of that specifically. So it's so important to unlearn that as a community, but it's really hard because we cannot do it ourselves. This fear did not come from nothing. It came because there is sort of, I don't know how to, like, sort of abuse from the system, I'll say.
Yeah.
There, yes, they do racial profiling. I think that's the word, yeah, racial profile. So yeah, it is a real thing that we cannot ignore. It's not just because Arabs are just being paranoid. There is something rooted in the system that is broken that we need to change.
Do you find it ironic that Algeria was colonized by France, and then here you are in Quebec, and there's kind of another layer of colonization on your families here by a French or French speaking
Mm,
government and system.
Definitely.
yes. And that is, I think that is probably a reason why the communities is so afraid, because
Yeah.
unfortunately they see this community as just one more threat, one
Mhm.
more power that's trying to dominate and assimilate and change our ways of thinking, which makes us as a community more rigid in our ways of thinking because we don't want to lose ourselves. And what we try to not lose, unfortunately, also comes with the part that we should maybe lose, the part that we should change. But
Yeah.
because we're afraid of losing everything, we hold on to everything.
I see.
And
Hmm.
yeah.
So I'm just thinking of some of Quebec's recent laws. They say this law is to protect people from, to stop people from wearing any like religious garb in the social service. Is that Bill 21?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, like, how you think of that and how your families, because it would mean that you couldn't be veiled and be a school teacher.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Mhm.
This
Yes.
No,
day and age.
exactly.
Um, yeah. Do you have a comment about that?
To me, that's just one more proof in
Proof.
this collective psyche that they don't
Mhm.
like us and they don't understand us and they're trying to change us. And I think especially the religious aspect is really interesting because, of course, the Arabs are really, really rooted in this religious way of thinking. I think it's bigger than people realize, or maybe they do, I don't know, but like Islam is so rooted in our ways of thinking, of analyzing the world, that it kind of becomes like a philosophy. We have our own ways of interpreting a lot of um, common things. They have our own definition, which doesn't necessarily clash with individualist viewpoints,
Yeah.
but they mean something really, really significant, and they kind of have different weight to it. Some like concepts, and because we're so attached to it, and it kind of become intermeshed with culture. It's not two different things. It is this come intermeshed and mixed.
Mhm.
When we view an attack on our religion, it becomes an attack on us as a people. It becomes something that is
As
so and
identity.
is an identity. And of course, when we go back to the history, we see that even the French occupation, when they was in Algeria, they tried this modernization, or like, we're gonna emancipate you by force,
Mhm.
especially the veiling aspect, which a lot of people don't really know. But there was this movement where we're gonna force them to not veil, so they can liberate, the women can liberate themselves from those beasts that are the men. And there was this big like movement that they were like, we're gonna unveil you. And what that did, they made the women start veiling themselves even more. There
Yeah.
was this thing that became a symbol of resistance, which is called the hayek. It's a long white fabric that's wrapped around all over your face. There's just an eye,
Mhm.
like showing.
Yeah.
And that became kind of the resistance of those women, like, we don't want you to touch us, don't touch us, leave
Yeah.
us alone, this
Don't
is
take
our
our
way.
clothes off.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't want to become like you, leave us, this is what we want,
Yeah.
leave us alone. And that was kind of ironic. And of course,
Mhm.
like, because of like the conflict started to grow even more, they abandoned this kind of thing. They entre guillemets left those women alone, which not really. Uh, but that was something that was so important. And I feel like when we talk about with people who here that advocate for women's rights, they don't quite understand this veiling aspect. They, unfortunately, they push this like narrative that we're oppressed and everything. But when we tell them that no, no, this is our resistance, we are resisting by wearing this
Yeah.
veil, we are resisting because to us this is showing you that I want to be like this, because everything in this society is designed to not make you want to wear it. There's multiple hardships along the path of wearing, being a visibly Muslim and Arab person, especially post 9/11.
Yeah.
We don't, like, this is a hardship that we decide to put. It's not something that is easy. It's not something that we're obligated. Of course, there's people that are
Yeah.
obligated. The
Yeah.
overwhelmingly adult majority of women be like, no, this is what I want. And if you try to take it away, I'm going to do it even more. I'm going to try covering my face. I'm not going to go out.
Yeah.
And it's counterproductive for what they try to advocate for. It's just pushing women away from these jobs, for example, teachers, by forcing, by not letting women veil. You're not gonna convince the woman to stop
To not.
veiling.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
gonna not work in those positions, and that's just gonna exclude them from, for example, financial independence. Is going to exclude them from these spaces, and you're going to force them into the homes, into other spaces,
Mhm.
which is worse. It's not
Not
liberating.
helping. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, whenever we're mistreated, we resist in some way.
Yeah,
And then
Always.
when we're told what to do, um, unsolicited advice, we're going
yeah,
to resist. And I think there's a spiritual aspect. Like in the mainstream society, there's a real lack of like genuine care or
yeah,
curiosity about these things. But spiritually speaking, a lot of First Nations women elders will wear a scarf. You've probably seen them. They look like the Ukrainian ones. They have flowers on
yeah.
them. And I remember a story of a First Nations elder um, being in the hospital, and they took her headscarf off. And she was
Yeah.
crying and she was feeling really, really bad. And they thought, oh, there's something wrong. She's depressed or she's going to die, or she was really um, not responding to people very well. And then a spiritual helper came in, a cultural helper, to talk. And they said, you have humiliated her in the eyes of God by removing her headscarf. And that's why she's feeling so terrible. And there's something like in many spiritualities, there's something sacred about the head, about the
Hair.
fontanelle, for many indigenous people, about their hair. And some people believe that covering it up is a sign of I guess like modesty in
Yeah.
front of the creator. So there's so much meaning behind it, isn't it, on a spiritual level? And
Yes.
the fact that that's all just like disregarded, it's
Yeah.
pretty lean in terms of
And
intellect. Yeah.
I think that's another effect of colonialism. We view the men as beasts and we view the women as victims that we need to save,
Oppressed.
so we
Yeah.
can continue this narrative that we're saving you because
Mhm.
we're going to remove the woman from you because you don't deserve any, you can't treat them right. And unfortunately, that puts all women in this kind of like, no, I want to be here. Why are you like pushing this
Yeah.
narrative? This is what I am. Why are you like this? It's kind of dehumanizing because we don't have voices. They talk about us in spaces and we're not welcome there, and they keep telling like this is what's best for you,
They
which is
treat us like
another.
children. That
Yes,
is the thing.
we are
We're minors.
infantilizers.
Like,
We're minors. We don't. They act like we can't protest. We can't resist. We cannot have our own thoughts, and therefore we're poor children that need to be
yes, that we
saved.
need to be
And
saved, and they know better than us what we need and what we want. And like Sarah said, like the men are considered like these savages, and we need to be saved from them. And I think they did the same thing for First Nations, to view them as like incapable of taking their own decisions and as minors. Even by the law, there was a law that considered them like children, uh, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, I mean, all the time, but especially under the Indian Act for
Exactly.
established First Nations. And I also work in the sort of violence prevention and recovery field. And one of the things I notice when I work with Indigenous women in community is if they're being harmed or beaten by men in their lives, they obviously they want that to stop. They want to be respected. They want to feel safe. They want to be safe. But at the same time, they don't want to throw the men under the bus. They don't want to call the
Yeah.
police because they know that so many Indigenous men die in police custody or are, beaten or tasered. And so at the same time as women being harmed, they're also protective of men. Because it's all part of their culture. Like we all need each other. So it requires a certain awareness of community
Awareness.
and how you
Yeah.
approach the work, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of these men, when you talk to them, they say, nobody's ever asked me how I'm doing before
Yes.
or how I
Yes.
feel, like, or what I need. Like, no, absolutely nobody has ever asked me that before. And so they feel quite uncared for. I'm not justifying violence at all, but it's just interesting how sometimes like you said, what's being done makes it worse. We just want to resist. We want to hide from authorities. We don't want to reach out and seek help. So just in terms of going back to this idea of community and extended family, how do people find joy in your culture? How do people express celebration of life and joy and coming together?
So many ways.
Do you want to go, Miriam?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of, like Sarah said, our culture and our religion is really intertwined. We cannot like tear them apart. We have a lot of religious events and yeah, like we have Eid. Eid is twice a year. And it's really, really about community, families coming together and like sharing the day together. And we have a lot of gifts and there's so many aspects to it. I don't know how, like, Sarah, you can come and give me more details to the
I think there is so much like focus on food. Food is really important for us, especially like pastries and sweets. Like she said in Eid, our customs is we go visit all of our friends and family, and we have this custom where we exchange sweets that we made, traditional sweets that we made, and they give us some and you give them some, and you speak the day, and you go around. Like I think that like the religious aspect, you need to go and visit everyone you can,
even the neighbors also, even if they're
the
not your
neighbors,
friends,
the friends. Yeah,
you go and give them like a plate.
So beautiful. So you're making community all the time.
It's always about giving, always about sharing. It's, you do not exist as one individual or even one family. That's not, you do not just go see your family, extended family. You also go to your neighbors. Like here in Montreal where we live, the neighbors are not necessarily Arab or Muslim, and sometimes they don't know why. We just come and we have sweets for you today, but we explain that it's Eid and we're sharing. But they're used to it now because it's been 16 years that we live here. But yeah, that's a big part of it, is like she said, food and sharing, a lot of sharing.
Yeah, that's so important, that sharing and generosity and the gift exchange,
Yes.
What do you think about allies? I guess I have to believe that in every culture, in every cultural group, there are people that extend care and solidarity across group lines. And certainly there were French people that were against France's colonization of Tunisia and Algeria and other places. What's your experience of that in Montreal?
It's really interesting because since we're in an cultural like city, there's a lot of solidarity. There's a lot of like intergroup relations where we exchange our experiences and we realize how similar they are. And it's lovely. Every time it's lovely. It's such an important and emotional point that we're not alone, even though we're not from the same backgrounds. We have similarities that we can share. Yes, like I can come and share my culture and you can come and share yours. It's beautiful, it's wonderful. Within Algeria, there's also like a part of people that are not from here. I know that like after the RAR independence, anyone who fought with the the Liberation Front was given honorary Algerian citizenship, especially
Oh, okay.
the
Yeah.
settlers. Yes,
Yeah.
it was beautiful. Like they like there's a lot of, for example, Fanon.
Hmm.
He was buried in Algeria, and he was given posthumous because he died before the independence. He was given posthumous citizenship of Algeria to acknowledge that like this struggle is collective. We all fought for it, and we're all part of it, and
Yeah.
you all deserve to live in this free Algeria
Mhm.
because you fought and you gave so much to it. And it's I think it's really beautiful that there was this consideration um, when Algeria was freed. And for example, I don't know if I like tell I don't know if Miriam I told you about it because our parents in the city that we're from a city of Oran in the western part of Algeria, which is a big city. They tell me that there's this couple, which is Monsieur and Madame Simon, and they are known. They've been there since before the independence. They've never left, and they're from this kind of like the center, the downtown, and everyone knows that they're French settlers, but everyone loves them because they've always been sympathetic to the cause, and they never left and they never needed to leave. They were given citizenship. They told them to leave, and even though there was like a big of conflict around the 90s, which was like kind of dark period of because there was
Oh,
like some religious conflict and Islamism and everything. Uh, Like people tell them, "Oh my God, we're scared for you because like you're not Muslim. What if you're gonna be attacked by those people?" And something that my mom told me that I was shocked. Those people that were like the terrorists, I mean, depending on how you see it, they came to them and be like, "You don't need to be afraid. You're safe. We know you. Everyone loves you. You don't need to be afraid, even though like we have no problem with you," because they acknowledge the fact that they fought probably
mhm.
with the Algerians and they
Yeah.
stayed in a resistance, and we acknowledge them
Hmm.
even before. So I think
Yeah.
that's a really like lovely story. I like it when my mom told me about it. It's
Yeah.
nice to know that
Beautiful.
like we because they tell us that oh like they were attacked, they were forced to leave this country before the settlers, but not really like and then they tell us like
It
when you
depends
speak
on
to the elders
their mindset. You've
exactly
got to,
the
yeah.
elders will say the people who left had a reason to leave, they had
Yeah, because
reasons
they
to
were
be afraid.
scared. They were
Yes,
scared.
Yeah.
because they participated in a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
um so
Yeah.
yeah.
Would you say that was land theft and oppression and taking
Yeah.
advantage of power over other local people, that kind of thing?
Mhm.
Yeah. And you mentioned Franz Fanon in your presentation. I teach some of his work in my classes. Do you want to say a little bit more about how you've been influenced by Fanon's writing?
Me, I think I'm gonna speak more about Reagan than Mariam because I know him more.
Yeah.
But he is deeply, I think he was my introduction to this point of
Mhm.
view from an academic standpoint because like I said in the presentation, I've always known these realities deep in my core inside of me, but I did not always have the language or the ways of expressing them in this professional way. And within my research of colonialism in my like teenage years, I like read a lot about the front movement and everything that was done by the intellectuals to support the movement. And then I came across Fanon and it was like, oh wow, he is literally like a psychiatrist, like everything I wanted to be, but he was a militant, he was an activist, and he deconstructed this society from the
Mhm.
psyche of
Yeah.
everyone involved. And it was beautiful. I love his work. I still do. And there's so much it's still relevant to this day. He wrote a book within the years, I think it's called the fifth year of the revolution, the Algerian Revolution, where he analyzes the effect of this culture on the people who are fighting, and he speaks about like the the pathology of the resistant and how they view them as sick, even though they were not sick, they were just
Oh,
survivors.
yeah.
and and yeah, I really like when I knew that he was given posthumously the Algerian citizenship. It was beautiful. It was like it's really nice that he
Yeah.
was acknowledged, and he is important. There's so much cities, there's like schools, there are hospitals that are named after him. He is really loved back home, and it's nice.
I think one of his famous quotes was, "No black child will ever suffer from an Oedipal complex."
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the listeners, check out Frantz Fanon. Yeah, anti-colonial
Mm,
psychologist, and really influenced people in the African continent and the Caribbean and wherever
mm.
decolonizing was happening, or anti-colonial movements. Yeah, so any last words, anything that you'd like to share about what you'd like people to know, just in terms of understanding like well-being or illness in your cultural terms?
Go ahead, Miriam, and I'll add something a
Yes.
bit. Yeah.
I think what's like we mentioned, I think everything that we said still revolve around this idea of understanding and really accepting the differences, the cultural differences. You cannot pretend like, yeah, I want to understand you and I want to include you, but if you do not really believe, if you do not really want to include the other communities, it's gonna show in your practices, in your ways of talking, and in your interventions. So it's really important to keep in mind that it's okay to be different. It's okay to view things differently. It's okay that this person feels a certain way and believes in certain things that for you are not scientific or do not align with your values or your point of view. And yeah, we should do something. I don't know how we should talk more about it, and really maybe in schools or like for children, because that type of mentality has to change early on, because with time it's really difficult to change somebody's mind if it's been 50 years that they view things a certain way. But like, we have to talk about differences in a more inclusive way, but really not just in surface and be like, yeah, this is important feminism, and no, really talk about deeply accepting differences.
So it's beautiful to be who you are. Be
Exactly.
proud of
Be
who you
proud of it, because
are. Yeah.
here in Montreal, there's so many different communities, and trying to make us all like the same, like Sarah said, we're gonna be even more like, we're gonna resist by holding everything more deeply, and it's not gonna help, because even the bad things or the things that need to change, they're never gonna change, because we're like, no, if we change that, you're gonna erase us and we're gonna disappear, and that's not what we want. So
Yeah.
it's not helping anybody.
Yeah, the best way to help people change is just to say, we love you the way you are, really.
Exactly.
And then there's
Exactly.
room to breathe,
We
right?
saw that in psychology. You just accept people and everything is gonna be fine. There's no point in doing that. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Sarah?
Yes. I want to add that there is a big need to acknowledge. I think as like a Quebecois society, because of their history with religion, there is a big
Mhm.
fear,
Yeah.
and therefore there's a big they want to ignore spirituality as a whole
Yes.
for everyone, and they want us everyone to forget about it. But because of like culture like mine, where it's so deeply ingrained in
Mhm.
our psyche, we need to make spiritually aware practices. And I think it's relevant for pretty much all communities, because everyone has their deep like spiritual ways of interpreting certain situations. And something that I wrote what was interesting is that what's the point of forcing someone to think about the unconscious mind when for them it's as irrational, as immaterial
Yeah.
as the relationship with God? What
Yes.
do you mean the psyche and the Oedipus complex? What is that? You're saying n'importe quoi to me? What makes sense is that God or whatever they want to believe. It's two immaterial things, but somehow one is considered very scientific and very rigorous, and the other is like, what are you saying? You're delusional. And
Right.
yeah, I think it's really, really important to recognize the fact that spiritually is can be a tool for change, can be a tool for communication, and we need to accept it and stop fighting it so much. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I learned in my Métis culture was that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and yeah, the spiritual part of ourselves, it's what connects us to other people, and things like love,
Yeah.
right, and empathy and care, and our loved ones on the other side, our ancestors. I mean, it's all really important, and yeah. And even if you don't believe it yourself, if you're practicing in the psychological fields, you have to respect it in other people, right? Like you said, so-called unconscious mind, that's not more important than actually what we believe about the power of prayer, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you so much. I just I feel so blessed that you agreed to have this conversation, and it's so important. And maybe next time we'll talk about philosophers. We'll talk about I think everyone thinks he's French, but he was Algerian, right? Yeah. Okay. So I wish you well. Have a beautiful
Thank you so
day,
much.
and I look forward to the next time that we get to interact.
Yes,
thank
you so much for inviting us. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening, everybody.